The end of the year is a great time to step back and take stock, and so this week I've decided to do my first proper watch collection video. My name is Louis and I'm a classic menswear enthusiast and watch nerd. If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at @_holecut. Last week I did an overview of my dress shoe collection, so if you're into shoes, remember to check that video out straight after this. Okay, let's get started. A lot of people have stories to tell or emotional attachments to their watches, but for me they are just nice to wear and enjoy. I will keep it simple and go through them in the order I acquired them. There are timestamps in the description, so you can skip around the video if you don't want to watch the whole thing. For reference, my wrist is only 6 inches or 15 centimeters. First up is the Pulsar VX32-X329, which I received as a birthday gift a few years back. It isn't the first watch I ever owned, but it is the first one I have kept. Because I didn't used to wear watches, I often receive watches as presents, and I'm now a bit ashamed to say I used to give them away because they were too big, or I didn't like them. It has a case size of 35mm, which is a nice size for a dress watch. It's quartz with an uncomplicated dial, fine as an everyday watch. I used to wear it to the office every day until I started to change up my style, which necessitated purchasing more watches of course. It is rather worn now, and you can see the brass is starting to show through on the case, and the black leather strap is tattered. I think it adds a bit of character though. I don't see myself ever parting with this one. For those that don't know, Pulsar is a Seiko sub-brand. Next is the Rado Centrix Open Heart R30180-162, which I can honestly say was the first watch I bought with my own money. I was originally looking at a Tissot in gold, but I was unsure of the size at 39mm. I couldn't find one to try on in a store, so naturally I bought the next best thing, which was this Rado. I fell in love with it straight away, and I still really like it now. The movement is a modified ETA 2824 with an 80-hour power reserve, which is basically the Powermatic 80 found in other Swatch Group watches, so it's reliable and easily serviceable. I've owned it for a few years now, and the gold plating has held up really well. The bracelet is ultra comfortable, the ceramic is buttery smooth. It feels like quality, you definitely get what you pay for. But it's difficult to find the right occasion to wear this. It sounds weird, but it is too formal and too casual at the same time. I don't think it goes well with shorts and a t-shirt, but equally it doesn't seem to pair well with a suit or other smart attire. I have thought about selling it from time to time, but even though I got a nice discount, I paid around £1,500, it's probably worth about half that now. Whoops. Since I didn't buy the aforementioned Tissot I was still in the market for a gold dress watch which I could wear at the office and that would pair well with brown shoes. I thought that the Citizen BM8242-08P was a nice cheap alternative, and being a solar powered eco drive watch, it should just keep running and running. I think the champagne dial and gold plated case is a great combo. At 36mm, I think it's a lot more wearable as a dress watch than the Leloc 2. The strap is a little stiff and wearing a bit now, but that's to be expected with affordable watches. I feel Citizen deserves a lot more credit as a brand, and wouldn't it be great if all quartz watches were solar powered? Next is the Casio Edifice EFR-S108 D-1AVUEF. I bought this one when my watch obsession really began to take off. I was obsessed with Watch YouTube, and this one cropped up a few times as an alternative to expensive sports watches like the AP Royal Oak and the Patek Nautilus. A lot of people bang on about Casio G-Shocks, but for me, this one is the real Casio. The proportions are perfect with a 37mm case, and it's so thin it wears beautifully on the wrist. Stainless steel, sapphire crystal, very decent for less than 100 quid. The Edifice line is great value for money. This is the Casio Enticer MTP-1275SG-9ADF. I think I first saw this one in an episode of Ben's Watch Club, touted as a sort of Datejust homage. I like that it gives off a Datejust vibe without being a proper homage. I think that's the right way to do these types of watches. It has a beautiful sunburst dial, and although the case is plated brass and the bracelet has folded links, I think for around £40 you can do a lot worse. The case size is 38mm, which is perfect for a sporty watch, and it has a nice presence on the wrist. I really enjoy wearing this one. The original Timex Marlin was cheap and not sexy at all, but nostalgia has made the Marlin 34mm hand wound a popular neo-vintage watch. A lot of guys won't contemplate wearing a watch this small, but it's perfectly sized for me. I really like the acrylic crystal too. Am I the only person that likes to stroke the crystal? Perhaps. The hand wound movement is pretty crummy though. It feels like the crown might break off when winding it. I might try it on a leather strap at some point. I think I paid £70 for this, which I think is about fair. I wouldn't have paid full price. There are many variants available now, including 40mm variants, so there are options for every wrist. Accurist is a classic British brand, one that you will often see on the high street. They sell nice looking, inoffensive, everyday watches. The type of watches that your older relative who isn't into watches would wear. They recently rebranded though, with an entire new lineup, and discontinued all of their old models. One of the models they ditched was this, the Retro Racer. As you can see, I have a bit of a thing for retro and vintage styled watches, and this one is no different. It's a classic looking retro racing chronograph. I think it is easily the best of Accurist's old lineup, with its 40mm cushion case and surprisingly nice leather strap wearing nicely on my tiny wrist. Strangely, it doesn't have a running seconds hand, only a chronograph hand, so more of a poser watch than a genuine tool watch, but that's okay. I think it was $64.99, which is great value for money. I don't wear this one much though, so I can see myself selling it if I manage to pick up another chronograph. Again, something vintage looking, like a Seagull 1963 or a Dan Henry 1937 Tress chronograph. Next is the Casio Edifice EFV-110D-7AVUEF. The specifications of this watch are so good for the money. 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown and screw down caseback. A beautiful little sporty watch, and it cost me around 50 quid. What a steal. It's small at 35mm, but there is a near identical 40mm version if you prefer. The white dial is my favourite, but it also comes in blue and black variants. Probably the best quartz watch you can buy for around £50. The Art Deco movement was one of the last great art movements. Nowadays, a steaming pile of garbage counts as art, but I digress. Fortunately, Art Deco is still very popular, especially in the watch space. This is the Rotary Special Edition Champagne Collection Art Deco. I first saw this on an episode of the Urban Gentry. It's basically just a rotary ultra slim with a patterned dial, but it's lovely. I like that there is no seconds hand, no problems with the seconds hand not hitting the markers, and I think it looks more elegant without one. The case is 36mm in diameter, which is the perfect size for a proper dress watch. It has that little bit of flair though, which means it probably won't work as an everyday dress watch. But for a special occasion, sure. It's limited to just 200 copies, but it's still available to buy last time I checked. Dress watches certainly aren't as popular as they used to be, and the affordable watch space is very crowded right now, which probably explains why it isn't sold out. Still, if you can get a nice discount, it's a great buy. I paid £65. The Tissot PRX has been a sensation since it was released. There are many iterations now, but for me, the 35mm PVD gold-plated variant is the real gem. It is true to the original Tissot C-Star from the late 70s, which it is based on. A lot of the classic sporty gold watches are unaffordable for the average guy, and this is the next best thing. It is quartz, but if Tissot release a Powermatic 80 version, I will probably buy that as well. It is a little bit bold and flashy, which is exactly what I was looking for. Before this, I had bought a gold-toned Seiko 5, and it was truly dreadful. The gold finishing was really bad and started to tarnish straight away, and the bracelet was worse than watches that cost 30 quid. I sent it back. I hope to own another Seiko one day, but my experience so far has not been good. Solid gold watches are so expensive these days. I'm surprised more watchmakers aren't releasing PVD gold versions at affordable prices. The Rado Golden Horse, for example, would look amazing in PVD gold. I don't care what anyone says, the Q Timex 1979 reissue is a legitimately cool watch. It was massively hyped at the time of its release, and for once it was deserved. It is a great retro styled watch. By the time I got mine earlier this year, the hype had all but gone away, so I got a real bargain and paid less than half retail. I had to go for the classic Pepsi colourway, like a Rolex but for poor people. The 38mm case will suit almost any wrist, and the bracelet looks brilliant, but it is a bit of a hair puller. If you can deal with that, it's a stunner, a great casual weekend watch. The great thing about vintage watches is the awesome designs, but it's hard to find original watches in good condition that haven't been messed with. That's why I love it when a brand like Timex releases watches like this Mark 1 mechanical, a vintage style watch in a vintage style case size of 36mm. For me, this is the perfect field watch, perfect design, perfect case size. Like the Marlin, the handwear movement could be better, but as it will only be worn occasionally, it's not a big problem for me. Again, I paid less than half retail. Bargain. If you want something similar, but more reliable and more accurate, then get your purse out and buy a Hamilton khaki field instead. The Zeppelin Hindenburg LZ129 7037-3 takes its name from the famous airships of the 1930s. But unlike the airships, this watch isn't a disaster. It's another watch I became aware of thanks to TGV of the Urban Gentry. His video featured the 7036-3, a larger 40mm variant. This one is the ladies version, and it is very similar, just smaller at 36mm with a slightly shrunken dial layout. I really love the vintage style, and the moon phase is just a really cool complication. I've always been fascinated by space, and the midnight blue dial reminds me of a night sky. It is quartz, so you'll spend less time setting the watch, which is a relief for a watch like this. Zeppelin is one of those brands that nobody really pays attention to, but they do some really great work. This watch reminded me of the Longines Spirit, but it's really only a passing resemblance. It's the Casio MTP-V005L-2B4UDF. The case is 40mm and it's way too big for my wrist. Still, a nice watch, ideal if you're not a dress watch guy, but you want something a little bit dressy. A typical cheap and cheerful Casio. I picked it up for less than £30, but I will definitely be moving it on at some point, as I just can't wear it. And the last watch is the Casio MTP-1275SG-9ADF. Casio really needs to shorten its model numbers. It's my latest watch purchase, which I bought because it was two-tone gold and stainless steel, and the case design reminded me of the Vacheron Constantin overseas. It's a really slender watch, very dainty and thin. The case size is 35mm, lovely champagne dial. The bracelet is wearable but low quality, easily the worst of any of the Casios I own. Fortunately, it was very cheap. And there we have it. If you have made it this far, you may have noticed that almost all of my watches are between 34 and 38mm. I found my sweet spot and I know what works for me. It can be hard to accept, but I've stopped lusting after watches that are simply too big for my tiny wrist, even if it means missing out on many great watches. I see so many guys wearing chunky, hefty watches that are too large, the lugs overhang the wrist, etc. It just looks really sloppy in my opinion. Of course, everyone is entitled to their own preferences though. If I can give any advice, it would be to buy what you like and like what you buy. Don't try to impress anyone else. Don't buy into the hype or feel pressured to conform, because it won't make you happy anyway. I realise that I talk about the prices of watches a lot. I know talking about money can make some people uncomfortable, but it is an important factor when it comes to watches. There is no getting away from it. I don't plan on buying any more watches this year, but I'm always on the lookout for a good deal, so I can't make any promises. I was going to tack my watch collecting goals for 2023 onto the end of this video, but it's turned out to be a lot longer than I expected, so I will make a separate video for that instead. That's all I've got time for today. See you next time.